You went to WCW this last year, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. Were you the one that was playing Tao like shortly beforehand?
That was also me. Yeah. Yeah. So I was playing Tao for Team Canada, and then
Gotcha.
Guard was better. So,
Fair, fair.
so I'm playing singles. I'll play the better option.
Yeah, Guard has been better than Tao for almost this entire edition, I think.
Almost. I guess early or like medium 10th. I think Tao had a moment.
Yeah.
Actually, even into the summer. I think it was really like late last summer. Guard got some kind of key buffs, especially to Scions, and that was
fair,
what
yeah.
that kind of pushed him over the edge.
Yeah. It's always been an interesting one because my roommate plays Tao as
Oh,
well.
there.
He's newer to the game. I don't remember this as well as he does, but I think the current record is 17-0 for Guard.
Ooh.
So
Ooh.
but I also have like other big Tao players in my area, like Jason McKenzie's probably the most famous one. And I can tell he's only beating me because he's better, not because his army's better. But it is what it is.
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I think Tao is pretty uniquely suited to beat Guard right now. Maybe. I think
Interesting.
Tao is one of the armies that can do it, namely because hammerheads exist.
Yes.
Just that
yeah.
flat 6 plus D6 is pretty spicy.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, but we'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit later.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go ahead and do a quick intro, and then we can launch into it. I'll try and mute myself, but I'll be prioritizing muting myself for the recording instead of for you. So if I ever just like coughing, Anyway, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tactical Debrief. My name is Joshua Tushy Howard, and today I am joined by Zach Comeau, coming in off of his recent win at All Is Dust, I believe was the event.
That is correct.
Yeah, and I know I've been seeing Zach's name pop up over some time, and it seems like that area of Canada in particular has a wealth of very strong Guard players. As I know, you, Nick Gigello, and John Monteros are all reasonably close to each other, and I see your names pop up at a lot of events. But Zach, this is the first time in a little while that I've seen you win an event with Guard. So how is that feeling for you?
Oh, thanks for the intro. Happy to be here. It's feeling great. I was getting ready to bring Bridgehead to this event, but I wasn't. It was powerful, but I wasn't like fully vibing on it. And then after the nerf, I was like, I gotta try Hammer, and boy, do I like Hammer.
Nice.
It's got everything I like. It's got speed. It's got strats, and it felt like everything really clicked, and it was a good event.
Yeah, I do want to ask a little bit about that Bridgehead, because I think just about every Guard player above about like 1600 elo was on Bridgehead for 2-3 months there. What kind of version were you playing, and how are you feeling about it, especially towards the end of its life cycle?
So I was playing a kind of heavy artillery Bridgehead, actually. I really thought the artillery teams were pretty interesting with the big strength 12 AP 2 flat 3 damage, particularly for some matchups, because that flat 3 is just so crippling to anyone trying to play infantry. So I was kind of playing. So I mean, I still had, I think, like 65 or 75 Scions in the list.
As you do.
With Toroxes, some Krieg heavy weapon teams, the Catachan Mortars, they're just key. But then my kind of like flex point was those artillery teams.
Yeah.
Particularly because Bridgehead, you had the strip cover strat, which was very good for them, and the native rerolls. To help kind of just push them over the edge. And I think the strength, I think one of the maybe weaknesses, if there were that many, of Bridgehead was particularly popping transports. That you drop a Scion unit down, sure, it'll kill God, but if God is inside a transport, you're just killing the transport first, and then so with those 3 artillery teams, plus maybe some mortars, plus like some incidental fire, you could really chip down transports indirectly, and then the Scions could go to work on the contents.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that was kind of the idea behind it. I did some testing practice, but I didn't have a chance to bring it out to an event, unfortunately.
Fair enough.
Before the nerfs.
Yeah. Now, Zach, I know I just asked you this, but for the people at home, I know that you were playing Tau shortly before the World Championships of Warhammer. We did switch over to Guard. Is there like a particular affinity that you have for like either of these armies, or have you always been a Guard player?
So I think the year was 2006 when my neighbor got the War Gear book, and I asked him, I was like, what is the strongest gun in the game? And he told me it was the railgun. And so then I asked for a Tau army for Christmas. So that was my first love. But he was playing Guard, and he had a battle cannon Leman Russ, and so our games on his basement floor would devolve into Leman Russ with a battle cannon against a hammerhead with a railgun, shooting at each other from 72 inches away until one of them died, and that was the one who kind of won the game. So I've and he since quit the hobby, and then I picked up his Guard collection, and then I've been expanding it ever since. So I like them both. I kind of flip-flop based on which one I think is better in the meta. And then I was playing Tau pretty much all of last year up until Worlds for Team Canada, because we had John Winter Russell. He was our Guard player, so you only get one of each faction for the WTC, and so he was on Guard, so then I was on Tau. So it's that was the decider there, and I think they were pretty good at the time. They took a couple light nerfs going into Worlds, which they were light, but they kind of changed up. You kind of lost one unit, which kind of made them a little bit iffy. And then Guard is good, so if Guard is good and I've got Guard, I'm going to play Guard.
Yeah, makes sense. I think it's been really interesting just like looking at how like Tau has worked, because it generally requires putting two pieces out, whereas a lot of their armors only ever have to put one of them, and that's something that I found like can be really easily preyed upon by the right opponents. I can see why it wouldn't be as fun playing that into singles. But let's go ahead and talk about what we actually did here at All Is Dust, because it is a bit of a new style. And I remember when the book came out, me and the circle of people that I was talking to were looking at Hammer and just going, I think this is just combined but worse. But there were a couple people, I know David Gaylord in particular was one of the people who was like, dude, Hammer's the best. Like, I am so excited about this. What were your initial impressions of the detachment as the book came out, and how has that evolved over the past like month or so?
So if there's something I love about Guard, it's the Leman Russ chassis. I have, I think, 13 of them, because I have 2 different armies that can run 6 Leman Russ and then 1 extra, just because why not? So when the book came out, I was initially pretty disappointed, because really, like, I've been running Leman Russ Demolisher spam since like 5th edition. Like, I love my Leman Russ Demolisher spam, and so the Demolisher nerf kind of hurt. Bridgehead was really powerful, so I didn't look too deeply into it initially. I looked at the strats. I was like, these strats seem like they're good, but I was like, what is the balance of tanks?
Yeah.
And so the Bridgehead nerfs kind of really made me really think, and I was like, what is this like? There's like a balance of tanks there, and like you said, combined also has a lot of play. And so then I kind of thought about like, what is my play style? I think that's really the key point between the two. Is I really like speed and I like to move block. And so Hammer has, particularly with the Toroxes, I was playing more Toroxes and Bridgehead, and I was like, wait, Hammer makes these even better. So I love the Toroxes and Hammer, and they're the smallest part of the list, but I think they're really the cornerstone of the list. Because I mean, we'll talk about when we get into some of the matchups, but I think they alone really make some of the matchups playable.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely remember looking at Hammer, and again, I didn't think it was particularly good, but then I actually played a couple of games with it on TTS. I was like, okay, I see what this is doing at the very least, and it very rapidly started making sense to me. And so now I'm starting to look at a lot of lists where it's like, you take basically the same list in Hammer and the same list in Combined, and they're pretty similar a lot of the time. There's a lot of just like small style choices that I've generally been seeing. What decided to push you to hammer versus combined? Is it really just a difference in the Torok's capabilities?
That and I really so my thought was back on the balance of tanks. The Leman Russ tank commanders, the point increase, the loss of demolisher shots. Like I just don't think they have a space in competitive play right now. Mm-hmm. So if you want orders on your tanks, it means, like you said, you either have to go combined and then spend CP to get those orders, or you play Dorn tank commanders, which are pretty good, but they're very expensive. Right? They're expensive pieces. You're going to want to invest a lot into them. And so I think Hammer kind of has that combination of strats where, because you get that auto advance built in, the Toroxes don't need you to invest much into them. They don't even need orders, like just 18 inches auto advance. Sometimes you want to go through a wall, but they're relatively cheap in that respect, which lets you focus on the big tanks. Yeah. So where I think combined, you get the lethals, huge, really ups your damage output on the big tanks. I like to focus on getting the most out of my big tanks, and particularly, like I said, kind of the movement. The movement is what I really like about Hammer. Well, just the ability to put a Dorn 16 inches, right? You can just cover so many things and just open up new avenues that maybe your opponent wasn't expecting.
Well, let's go ahead and get right into it then. Start talking about the list that you actually brought to this event. Could you go ahead and take us through it?
Yeah, of course. So right off the bat, I mentioned 2 Dorn tank commanders. I think Hammer combined, either one, I would probably start the list with 2 of them. I think 3 is possible, but it's a lot of Dorn tank commanders.
Yeah.
I did play 3 Dorns. The third one is just a regular Dorn. And the idea there is I really value that blanket damage, particularly back to Hammer, where I can be really pushing aggressively with this Dorn. And I think my golden rule of 40k is ABC, always be charging. So in that stream game, I was charging my Dorns in as often as possible, really because those orcs, the general orc chaff doesn't really threaten a Dorn. And what you're doing, and you're getting some extra movement, you're getting on an objective, you're taking away their options. And then if you need the options, you can always 1 CP, fall back, shoot for free. They can't, well, not free, it's 1 CP, but they don't have that capability. So if you can take away their options, it's just win for you.
Yeah.
So those 3 big tanks kind of form the core of my list. And actually, I mentioned I play teams a lot, so I was testing 4 Dorns.
It's a lot on WTC terrain, but
it's a lot on WTC terrain, which I kind of realized was maybe too many Dorns.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't tried the Leman Russ battle tanks before, but I was kind of like, if I cut 1 Dorn, and then there's also the element of model availability. If anyone watches the stream, you might notice 2 of my Dorns are gray. They're borrowed from a friend. Thank you, Charlie.
Let's go, Charlie.
So getting a 4th Dorn was going to be a challenge. So what can I cut for a Dorn? Maybe I'm going to try out these Leman Russ battle tanks. And for some extra context for people, they get reroll 1s to hit natively and reroll all hits on objectives you don't control, which is quite good on the volume of fire that they put out. And so kind of my thought, like back to really trying to get the most out of Hammer, is sending them forward deep, always be charging, using them, and then the other unit is a pair of Hellhounds, which happen to be T10 2+, which is just excellent. Using those 4 little tanks to bait out my opponent's anti-tank. Yeah. To try and get my opponent to bite, to commit into them, and then I still have 3 Dorns to back that up. So that's like the core is the 3 Dorns, then the slightly bigger core is those 4 tanks. And then, of course, you need to score. So 3 Catachan mortars. I still think they're very valuable, particularly in a world where Eldar is still very popular, particularly for the Orc matchup, which I knew going into this event that the Dakka matchup would probably be the one to beat. And a big piece of tech that they love is the Zogrod unit. And so if you don't have an answer to that Zogrod unit, it can just jail you really quickly. And then that can just be game. It's just that one unit just putting you in jail.
Yeah.
So then the other side to that is 2 units of Ratlings.
Oh wow,
So
you
originally
really indexed, yeah.
Oh yeah, so really so before I was testing the Krieg heavy weapons teams, which are pretty good. I was testing even just like a Catachan squad or two. Just again in the Torox, just put out a ton of OC, use it to flip objectives. But then I was like, this orc matchup exists, and the only way you can deal with it is you gotta have infiltrators. And so Ratlings are that. But also what I've kind of discovered and really started to love about the Ratlings is their interactions with Toroxes.
Oh yeah.
Because when they shoot, they get to move, and you can get back in. So you can be jumping out of a Torox that moved really far, shooting something, getting back into that Torox, or shooting something, then moving even further to either flip an objective or move block. So it's just like a deep toolbox that you can dig into with those Ratling units. And then the final kind of 2 pieces are an Enginseer for those 4++s, which I don't think I played him the best. I think he is kind of difficult to play, particularly because the range is so short. You have to be really thinking a turn ahead.
Yeah.
And Creed. She's a bit expensive, but what I really wanted to do was to be able to buff up the mortars so they can just hit better. As well as, and when they're not useful for shooting, they're very useful for throwing grenades.
True,
so especially on GW terrain, I'll jam her in a corner. She's got a big 12-inch radius, and then mortar squads either coming out of Toroxes or moving forward, just chucking free grenades all game long. So I ended up playing the night matchup twice, and all those free grenades really start to add up over the course of the game.
Yeah.
So I think she's kind of expensive for a single character. I don't have anyone I can attach her to, so if they have indirect, she's kind of got to hide in a Torox for a bit. But I think she's worth it for just the amount of free mortals she puts out. And then when you need the mortars, you need the mortars.
So, and you also had, what was it? Was it Catachan that were initially in the Toroxes as well, or what did you have in your Toroxes by default?
So by default, well, that's the interesting part is in the night matchup, I would put mortars and Ratlings. So sometimes mortars in one, Ratlings in the other. In the orc matchup, for instance, I put Ratlings in one and just Creed in the other, just to fill it.
Yeah.
So just kind of like so one point that a lot of people don't know is you fill your transports after you roll for attacker defender. So you'll know if you have that infiltrate drop first or not.
Yeah.
And then you can decide like, okay, I can either deploy both my infiltrators or I can't. So if I can't, then one can fill the Torox. If I can, then maybe they both go out. The mortars fill the Toroxes. So just trying to be really flexible with it.
Yeah. Interesting. So it already sounds like, as we're getting to this point in the list, it sounds like the kind of list where you need a lot of reps to play this version of Hammer. How many games did you have with variations of this list before this event?
Not enough.
Not enough.
I think
you won.
I think I
it was
made.
Enough.
Yeah. I think I got like 6 games on it. 6 games on a Hammer before the event. I really prioritized trying to get reps into the Dakka matchup.
Yeah.
Because that was the big one that I was worried about. And yeah, even during the event, I was discovering new things that I could do. And so I was kind of like, I built the list as just to have a really deep toolbox of stuff that I could draw on. And then just like try and use it as creatively as I could in the event, which is how I like to play. I like to try and play creative lists that give me lots of options.
Yeah, now I do want to go back just a little bit to talk about the mortars, because it sounds like you found really good ways to use them in games where the indirect isn't, isn't just like oppressive, just being indirect against some different armies. But how do you feel like they compare to other things now at the 65-point range? Because this is still Catachan, Arcadians. Yeah, I guess Krieg are also in the conversation. Another unit of Ratlings, even like potentially a Scout Sentinel. What attracted you specifically to the mortars in this situation?
So my thought. So I've been playing mortars I like to say I was playing Mortars before they were cool. I took
cool.
I took Mortars to the World Championship. I think I was the only person that did. I mean, there were 50 points at the time, so how could you not? Was kind of my rationale. But really, my thought with them is, so I love Scout Sentinels. While we're at it, Scout Sentinels, incredible. I think, in terms of value. So I guess I try to think about things in terms of value, where a Cadian squad or a Catachan squad, now the same price as Mortars, when they're not, their kind of thing that they do is they put OC, in my view at least, they put OC on a point. Mm-hmm. They don't really do damage. They don't, they move block and they put OC on a point. Maybe they chuck a free grenade. But when they're not doing that, they're not really doing anything. So you're not really getting any value from them. Whereas the Mortars, even at 65 points, if they're not out, they can also put OC on a point, right? You still have OC 6 in the unit. They can also chuck a free grenade. They can also move block because they're pretty good sized bases. They can't do it quite as well as Catachans or Cadians, but where they really shine is when they're just standing around, they're contributing.
Yeah.
And particularly, I think, for Hammer, where tankless are vulnerable to being move blocked themselves. So just the ability to just chip away, remove enemy chaff, also affects their scoring. It affects their screening. It affects their whole game plan, where they can't just be like, I'm going to sit this 50-point unit of cultists here all game and score my home. If you can just be like, no, you have to put something more substantial back there, right? Now that's something that's not necessarily interacting with you, and you haven't paid that much of a penalty to do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because I know, one of the reasons why Bridgehead loved Mortars is, of course, the reroll ones are fantastic, but Bridgehead is, if Bridgehead ever had to, go backwards to deal with something in their backline, the game was already, over. Bridgehead had already lost at that point. So just having 150 points just clear that out and then also do something was incredible. And now it sounds like you're at a spot where, because of the range that Hammer has, and because of the speed that Hammer has, if Hammer has to go backwards, it's not great, but you don't just lose the game on the spot if you end up having to do that. So I love the fact that you have these tools that are just so versatile. And they're still a lot cheaper than Catachan as well, which a lot of people kind of think of as the night piece. You can do kind of anything you want within. You just got to go out and do a little bit of battling. And Mortars can kind of fulfill a lot of the things that we were looking for with all these other units. I think it's really cool. So with that, then, let's go ahead and start talking about the actual games that we were playing. I know from the stream, it looked like you guys were playing on Games Workshop terrain for this event. Is that right?
Yeah, so it was, so our local store owner, Dan, shout out Dan, he helps organize great events, has lots of terrain. He bought a ton of WTC sets.
Oh, okay.
But there's desire to play GW, so they're chopped up WTC sets to fit GW terrain.
That's actually really funny.
So it's GW almost. So it's GW layouts, but some of the ruins are a little bit bigger, some are a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
But it's pretty close to GW.
I do want to ask a little bit about that then, because I know different regions. I currently live in SoCal, and there's kind of been a small push to we're currently playing Games Workshop almost entirely for some events to start doing a little bit more WTC. But it sounds like you guys are having a little bit of the opposite. What's the reasoning for that?
Yeah, so it's kind of one of the functions of us being a relatively small community. Some of our older tournament organizers, people who organized a lot of tournaments in the past, really did so on the focus of preparing for the WTC. And so hence the push, play WC terrain, play WTC format, because that's kind of where people would go for those really competitive games.
Yeah.
But now with the rise of the GW events in the US, with the rise of Worlds, that's kind of prompted a push for GW in at least my region.
Gotcha. So is it now
Ottawa, Ontario?
Is it now a bit more mixed then? Are you seeing about half and half, or what's the ratio kind of like?
Yeah, so actually back to Dan at the Red Dragon. Again, shout out Dan, Red
Shout out
Dragon.
Dan.
We're actually flip flopping. So we do
Cool.
one. So he posts a GT every month. So it'd be one GT on GW, one GT on WTC.
Cool.
So I just played a GT on GW, and now I'm off to Toronto next weekend to play a team event on WTC format. So.
Awesome. Now, quick question then: is the list that you took to this event, is it playable on WTC, or would you have to change it?
Oh yeah, I think it's. I tend to design lists that are playable on both.
Mm-hmm.
It does change up how you play it a bit. But also, I mostly play WTC in a team format.
Yeah.
So in the team format, you have attacker defender, and you also get table selection if you're a defender. So I'm frequently designing lists to play on a table that I've selected, not necessarily one of those super dense WTC tables where there's very little movement.
Yeah. Well, makes a lot of sense. All right, Zach, let's go ahead and start talking about the actual event. And I see in your first round, you ended up playing against Knights. I know you said this was one of 10 games they had to play against them. Well, what happened in the first game? We tend to try and focus on like teachable moments in particular here, but if there's anything like really interesting or funny that happened during the game, I would love to hear about it as well.
Yeah, so I went first in that game. It was just standard take and hold, table 1, GW. Went first. I'm like, okay, like ideally want to go second, take and hold. But he left me 2 armigers that I could shoot at, so I shot at them. Didn't get either one. Kind of had to push some tanks a little more forward than I wanted to. Didn't get either one. Turn 2, he comes out. I've got lots of targets. Didn't get anything.
Uh-oh. What?
So I'm looking at the board state, bottom of 2, and I'm like, I haven't killed, like I've killed 1 armiger.
Yeah.
Am I about to lose this game? So that was like round 1. I'm like, man, am I gonna lose? But on the subject of teachable moment, I internalized. I remembered the ABCs of Warhammer.
Always be charging.
And so I actually, on turn 3, I charged both of my Russes into Warglaves. Because the Warglaves can't kill Russes in a round of combat. So I was like, that's fine. And what I was gaining from that was just holding him away from my Dorns.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I can't be eating these Melt-to-4 shots into my Dorns. He's going to kill something. I'll just give him that. I'll hold him there. I'll deny some primary. And then that worked out. And then turn 4, things swung my way. I got Bring It Down. I think I killed 5 armigers in a turn. And I was like, whew, all right, less sweaty. And so thankfully I was able to get the move block off. I was able to hold him back just long enough that my damage could kind of turn on. But I think that's, like we were kind of discussing, the combined versus the hammer. I think that is, and I'll mention it again probably when we get to the second night game, I think that is one of the weaknesses of hammer. Without those lethals, the multi-meltas just aren't reliable, and your damage is just lower.
Yeah.
And so you're having to rely on more movement tricks, more move blocking, to hold your opponent back, to keep their damage from hitting you as hard, because you're going to need more time to clear them out.
Yeah. Now, I got a couple of questions here on that topic. The first one is, what was the ratio of like big knights to small knights that was in this first game?
So both games were Canis, 5 Warglaves, and 4 Hellbruns.
Oh, interesting. That's basically exactly what my teammate plays.
Exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same list. I think there was like 7 knight players there or something silly. And every single one was playing pretty much the same list, the same ratio.
That's really funny.
They had like little tweaks of like the extra stuff.
Yeah, you have an immolator or subductors, or he's like,
or an assassin.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. And the second one was, you mentioned that you were taking Leman Russ battle tanks in Hammer, which I think a lot of people have generally looked at Leman Russ battle tank and said this is mostly only combined, and things like the Exterminator tend to be a little bit higher value in Hammer. What was the difference between the two for you?
My thought was, so actually back to the Karskin, going all the way back. Thinking about value, a Taurox plus a unit of Karskin is 175 points.
Mm-hmm.
a Leman Russ battle tank is also 175 points. So kind of my thought is to use these Leman Russ battle tanks in the same way that I would Karskin.
Interesting. Okay.
So a fast push threat where often so in a bunch of games I would I'd auto advance, send them 16 forward, send them sometimes even 19 forward, and then rely on those inbuilt rerolls onto objectives to get the job done. And so that ended up being a big swing in one of the later rounds, which we'll talk about, where Leman Russ going 19 inches was able to snipe a key character that was scoring off an objective.
Yeah.
In kind of a similar way to Karskin. And then the thought is, because it's Hammer, everything's built around tanks. I'm giving it the order, I'm sending it in, maybe I'm giving it the 4-up invol as well, but it's a one-way trip. I'm not expecting it to come back. And so it's not really, so their purpose isn't necessarily to be a force multiplier. It's to be a sacrificial. Here's a Russ. What are you gonna do about it?
Interesting. That's a very different perspective than a lot of people have on it. So it's become like this skirmishing piece for you that you just send it out. You'll kill the little trading piece at the beginning, and because it's still a Leman Russ that sometimes has a 4-up invul, your opponent now that's not trivial to remove. Leman Russes, you don't just get to remove them for free, and that's where the removing your opponent's anti-tank comes into play. That's a really cool way to go about this list. So it makes a lot of sense when you don't need the extra force multiplier for your Dorns, because they're still Dorns anyway. They still do a lot of damage. But it sounds like this first one, comes through. You kind of get bailed out by a bring it down, draw at the right time, and you end up taking it. I remember looking at the scores across this one and thinking, this might be the closest series of wins for a GT I've ever seen. I see ones here's one by 2, here's one by 1, here's one by 5, but this one, based on the start where you don't kill anything for 2 turns, I mean, it still ends up working out pretty well. So anything else about this one before we start talking about the Grey Knight matchup?
No, I don't think so. I think I played the next night matchup better. So
all right, we'll talk about that in a bit.
That one, yeah.
All right, cool. Next one we actually have up against Grey Knights, and it, at least according to BCP, it was not the Warp Bane, it was the original Index Teleport Strike Force, which still had the Missive Deimos and the Rapid Ingress nonsense that we had. How was this matchup for you?
So this one was kind of funky. So it was 30 Terminators. So it's 2 squads. Yeah, exactly. No Dread Knights. It's just all Terminators all the time. 2 squads of 10, 1 squad of 5, and then a squad of 5 Paladins, with 3 Librarians in the Terminator squads. So they're misting, they're sigilling, they're teleporting, they're ingressing. They're very slippery. But it was supply drop.
Oh.
So we're going down to one objective, and I went second.
Yeah.
So I knew kind of going into it, I don't have to put my foot on the gas. The Dorns absolutely spit 3 damage. Anytime I get a chance to interact with a Terminator squad, I'm going to kill a bunch of them. They really also just can't kill Dorns because it's a bunch of strength 6, I think, AP2. So they're wounding on 6s, and you're like, oh, sorry, buddy. You did 4 damage. Good job. So it was one of those, I knew I didn't have to put my foot on the gas. I could wait till the end of the game. I could just get out on that middle objective and score my points. And so that was kind of how that matchup went. It was kind of one of the, I just had a ton of 3 damage, even the Leman Russ battle tanks. And this is where maybe having some AP stacking could have helped me chew through them a little bit faster, with Exterminator. Yeah, Exterminator. But still having the Hellhounds to strip cover were still helpful to get that AP1 to a kind of relevant place. I think I used the AP strat as well, once or twice in that game, where I was just I want this unit to die.
Yeah.
Here's a bunch of AP 3 damage. Just get them out of here.
Yeah. How was the did your opponent do anything interesting to try and flip it? Because whenever you go first in supply drop, you're okay, I'm gonna have to take a gamble at some point. What was your opponent's gamble?
So actually his unit of Paladins, I think, that could come down turn 1, he strung them right across the middle. So he effectively just played to me. He was either I sit back with all my tanks and just kill this unit, or if I want to come out on any of the objectives, he gets the opportunity to both mists and then ingress. on his turn 1.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he was doing a lot of plays where he set up really well that if I want to do something, he's going to be able to both run away and then come back in a more advantageous position. But I think it was just the big tanks were just too big. That just wasn't really a matchup that they could really deal with the tank. So it was just kind of like he was really struggling to hold ground eventually.
Yeah. Now, because of the fact that this sounds like a matchup where if their highest strength is like strike 6 or sometimes even like strike 7, right? I've often found that you can put the Rogal Dorns in front of the Leman Russ battle tanks because your opponent just can't kill them. Is this one of those matchups that you found that was true?
Yeah, so I deployed my tanks on the line, like right on the line. Well, because his shooting is from the Librarian Mortal Wound Psychic Power.
Yeah.
And they're teleporting, so I can't really avoid it. And really what I wanted to prioritize was just getting out and taking over the middle.
Yeah.
And just bullying him back as much as I could. I think I probably could have done my move blocking a little bit better. I think particularly out of the Tauroxes with their just insane turn 1 speed. I probably could have screened him like all the way back off the table and taken a turn 1 like 15 on primary. But I didn't. I think I actually overestimated his damage a little bit. That it was played a little bit too cagey. I think that was a matchup where I could have really just disrespected his army and just taken over the table.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it before. That's one of the hardest things to do if you don't know it's the right thing to do in the moment. But cool. I mean, so you got the first one, the Imperial Knights, the Grey Knights. We can go ahead and move on to the next one. We got Chaos Space Marines and Pact-Bound Zealots. And I believe when I looked at this one, it was an Abaddon castle.
Yeah, so this is a teammate of mine, Tommy. Shout out Team Leg. And he's a fantastic CSM player, so I knew this one would be hard. I think I got this one by 2 points. And the game started out really good for me. My tanks were out where I wanted them. I was taking over the table. I was clearing out his chaff. But in Pack-Bound, he has a pair of Vindicators with Abaddon. And it's an interesting little strat. When he dark packs, the Vindicators get crits on 5s.
Mm-hmm.
And so he can and then Abaddon gives them full rerolls to hit. So it's a Vindicator critting on 5s with full rerolls, also in Overwatch.
Yeah.
And then because they're Nurgle, he has a 1 CP strat to make them lone op 18. So it's just this layers of rules that makes it very difficult to interact with the Vindicators. And so so things were starting out very good for me in this matchup until a Vindicator rolled up, killed a Dorn from full, which exploded, killing the other Dorn next to it.
No.
And so I went from having a very secure left flank where I was like, all right, this is locked down, I'll be all right, to no more left flank. Oh no, panic time. And so at that point, it was just scrape for points, deny him as hard as I could. But I internalized, always be charging. And I charged a Hellhound onto an objective to deny him, and I tank shocked the tank. So he had a tank that was scoring sabotage. I tank shocked it to death with the Hellhound.
Nice.
Flipped the objective, and then the Hellhound lived through his subsequent turn of shooting on 1 wound to deny him the linchpin primary at the very end of the game, which got me my 2-point victory.
Wow.
So there was quite a bit of luck involved towards my way, but sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, I've seen other similar builds to this one in the past. Sometimes I see them with Hellbrutes, right, where you get the both sustained and the lethal hits, which can be very scary. What was your method for trying to deal with the reactive lone op strat that they have?
So either kind of one of 2 ways. Either line up 2 targets that you're happy with killing, or you got to get close. And in that regard, Hammer's great for that because you can always get close. It's just a matter of if you want to. Mm-hmm. But then the asterisk is if they're Vindicators, you're potentially eating the Overwatch. And so after he killed those 2 Dorns, I really just ended up ceding that flank. But the Vindicators were kind of in an awkward spot, so he wasn't able to get them like really into the other flank, which kind of saved my bacon.
Yeah.
And because vice versa, he's also worried about because I outrange him. So he's kind of like, so it's a bit of a cat and mouse game, I think, and really trying to make sure that you don't forget about the strat and you have 2 targets lined up.
Yeah, nice. That's really funny. This is kind of on topic, and I'll tell it because one of the funnier games I played in a long time. This is a whole year ago when I was playing at a Teams event. I was playing a Storm Sword, one of the big Bane Blades with a D6 plus 2 damage, and I ended up playing up against a very similar list to the one that your friend was playing here, whereas a double Vindicator, Abaddon, and the Hellbrew, so you had the sustained lethal 5s. And we were still playing player placed at this point, so the terrain was wide open, and one of the things that I always found that I found can be really good into this and might be helpful for other people in the future, if they're playing the double Vindicators, usually you can't have them side by side, right? If they're next to each other, you can only reactive load up one of them. So you only want, the Chaos Space Marine player only wants to be showing one of them at a time. And so I just, moved my Storm Sword in such a way such that, well, you can only shoot me with one Vindicator at a time. I have a 4-up invul on it. You'd have to be very lucky to kill it. At some point, you're going to have to come out into the board because my skirmishing pieces are better than your skirmishing pieces, and I will outscore primary that way. And so eventually he just was like, here's 2 Vindicators. They whiffed, killed one of them on one turn, then just charged up in the other. So it's interesting different ways to try and deal with these very powerful army defining stratagems. So it sounds like you found a good way to deal with that. But with that, Zach, we have one more. That's your day 1. You got 3 wins on day 1. And fun fact, every single one of your day 1 opponents went 3-3 at the event overall. But for the next one, we had your next Imperial Knights matchup. And you said you played this one better. So what was the big differences here?
Yeah, so I think the big difference here is in the first one, I didn't fully respect my own damage. In the sense that because I was used to playing, so before the new codex I was playing 3 Demolisher tank commanders, basically every list start with 3 Demolisher tank commanders, particularly for the night matchup, because they would just make the night matchup a breeze. You show up with 3 Demolisher tank commanders, you're like, I'm just gonna kill all your knights, it's fine. But I didn't respect my own damage, that I do have the potential just to not kill any knights in a turn. If you just roll some good 5s.
Yeah.
So in this matchup, I really focused on setting up to move block. And so I think he went first in that game, but he deployed very conservatively because he was also respecting my damage. He didn't want to show too much.
Yeah.
So he deployed really conservatively, but what it meant is that there was kind of 2 choke points where I could just put units and just block up his whole army.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did for 2 turns, is I just choked his entire army in there and scored primary. And so it was, I think, a Taurox blocked one of them and Ratlings blocked the other. And then I just flipped it on the next turn. And while I was doing that, I was I got angles on kind of the most forward armigers and chipped away at them. But it was really I really focused on getting those move blocks, getting them very solid, carefully pre-measuring where can Canis go, because he's on a huge base.
Yeah.
Sure, he can go through walls, but he still has to fit his base.
Yeah.
And so even just one little Ratling, just standing where he'll end an engagement range, just keeps Canis behind the wall. And then the Night List is also quite short ranged, at least into Hammer. Mm-hmm. Where you can kind of ignore the Helverins, because strength 8 AP 1, well, what are you gonna do? But the really scary is the Meltas within 12.
Yeah.
That Melta 4, strength 12, quite scary. They can juice it up to AP 5. So you really so I found prioritizing the Warglaves and prioritizing blocking their movement and then prioritizing killing them as soon as they come out.
Yeah.
And by the end of the game, I think he just had 3 Helverins running around, which I was just charging at every and just being like, no, you're not getting on that objective. You're stuck here, buddy.
Yeah. And if Warglaves can't kill us in melee, Helverins are
Helverins are. Yeah. Well, and that's actually one of the interesting points about Helverins. You can charge Helverins with mortars. and they'll struggle to clear a unit of mortars for like a turn and a half because they're making, I think, like not very many kick attacks.
It's 4 attacks, and I think they're damage 1, right?
Yeah, and they're with no AP, I think.
Yeah.
So like you can put a unit of mortars in there and be like, that guy's stuck. Like, you can shoot me, but he's stuck there for the next turn.
Yeah. Nice. Well,
so, yeah.
I can't help but noticing here, Zach, that despite the fact that you said you played the second one better, you only won it by 1 point.
Yeah, so Canis is still Canis.
Yeah.
Canis did eventually make it out into the middle. He drew bring it down. I think Canis punched a Dorn in the sun, shot another Leman Russ to death, and then I still had a fair amount of army left. I put it all into Canis and he lived.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh no, Canis. So that was a big comeback point. And then he was also scoring, I think he had bottom of turn scoring on, I forget which mission it was, but
based on the fact that it is in the 50s, I'm guessing it's Burden of Trust.
That was exactly it. It was exactly Burden of Trust. So yeah, so we just, and you kind of get screwed going first on Burden. Going second on Burden? On one of them, you don't get to,
going second, you
Burden.
don't get the extra like protection, but you do have bottom turn, so it's like.
Yeah, but you do have bottom turn. So yeah, I think it was second on Burden of Trust, and thankfully I was able to squeak it out. But it ended up being it was one of those I felt confident into the first 3 turns, and then suddenly dice. But
yeah, suddenly that happens. Yeah. It's really interesting too, just like seeing that comeback potential, and whatever someone is like. Comes back, you have like a 35-point lead going into bottom of 5, and they're like, okay, well I have bottom of turn. I scored 29. Not quite enough. So glad that you're able to pull out this one. Next, we have a very interesting matchup, which is the Space Wolves Stormlance. How many Thunderwolf Cav was this guy playing?
Only 2 units of Thunderwolf Cav.
Whoa, mixing it up.
So we had 2 full units of Thunderwolf Cav with both the characters. He had 2 Vindicators. He had, I think, Logan with Blade Guard. I might be confusing the name. A stabby boy. He stabs pretty hard.
One that stabs cool. Yeah.
Yeah, he had the stabby boy with Blade Guard. He had his buff everybody character.
Ragnar, I think.
Yeah, Ragnar.
Yeah.
He had 2 units of JPIs and an Impulsor. So on the subjects, we actually played 4 rounds the first day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was a 4-round first day.
Why?
So this was so that way people could go home, because Canada's pretty big and we have a lot of driving to do.
Gotcha. Okay.
But anyway, so what that meant is I knew this pairing the night before.
Yeah.
So I sat at the bar long and hard, thought about how I was going to approach this matchup. So it was ritual.
Okay.
And so kind of my thought with the matchup was to play fixed instead of tactical, and play cleanse and assassinate.
Okay.
Because he was running 7 characters, I think, in the army.
Yeah.
6 of them which wanted to run at me. And it's ritual, so I can make my own cleanse targets.
Yeah.
So I can just cleanse across my line eventually. So kind of the thought was put him in that he either runs at me and I get assassinates, or I lose very quickly. But he runs at me and I get assassinates, or he holds back to try and deny assassinates. But then I get lots of cleanse, I get lots of primary.
Yeah.
And then I went second, which was
always good. Yeah.
So I went second, but one of those Thunderwolves. So one of the Thunderwolves started on the board, and then one of the Thunderwolves could arrive turn 1.
Yeah.
So he started one on the board, and he went for an 8-inch charge into a Taurox around a corner. He was going for I'm just going to put a unit of Thunderwolves kind of on a flank and see if he can deal with it. The answer was I could, because he didn't really threaten me with anything else on that turn.
Yeah.
Just because he wasn't fast enough, and I put the Ratlings as far forward as possible to try and deny that turn 1 reserve, strat reserves.
Yeah.
So I was able to just put my entire army into that Thunderwolf unit, and I wiped it. So it's feeling pretty good, but it left a big Thunderwolf-sized hole on that flank. Because for people that don't know, they get 2 reactive moves. Still, so they get 1 if you move within 9 inches, and then they get a full 6-inch reactive move if you move within 9, and then they get a D6 reactive move that can take them into engagement range when you shoot them. That one's once per battle. But what it means is if you move, well, exactly. So if you move within 9 and then they move 6 at you and then you shoot them, they just need to roll a 2 or 2 or 3 and they're touching you on your turn, which is real bad.
Yeah.
So you really have to sit back quite far. You have to be very careful with your movement that you don't trigger any of these reactive moves. You have to be very careful with your shooting order to make sure that when they do their D6, they can't just get out of line of sight. They do have to finish closer, but it's the unit has to finish closer. So it's like kind of gameable with like how they move.
Yeah.
So on my turn 1, I was able to wipe one of those Thunderwolf units. I was feeling great. Left a big hole. He brought in the second one in the hole.
Oh.
But he needed an 8-inch charge.
Yeah.
Because they get +1. They also get +1 to advance and charge. He needed an 8-inch charge. To get in there, he was going to touch a bunch of tanks, and then he failed it with the reroll.
Oh, no.
So that was a huge moment. And he kind of looked at me as like, that's probably game. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe. But in my heart, I knew like that was really what I needed.
Yeah.
I think even if he had made it, they're not particularly great at killing tanks.
Yeah.
The Dorn that he would have touched had the invul, and then otherwise he was touching a Hellhound and a Sentinel.
Cool.
So like, cool. But it would mean they would have been just further up, deeper into my lines. It would have made it just a little bit that much harder to deal with them. Because again, you have to fall back, but when you fall back, you can trigger that reactive move, and then they can come touch you. So he failed the charge, which meant I was able to just put my whole army into the unit again. This time I wasn't so lucky. They had like 3 wolves that lived.
Wow. Yeah.
But that was okay. He was also putting pressure on both flanks with his JPIs, with his scouts, which I was slowly able to weather. It was a bit difficult, which was kind of like keeping it close. But then once that second unit was mostly dealt with, then it was push time. So this is when I mentioned the Leman Russ coming in clutch, gave it the movement buff, gave it the advance and shoot, sent it rocketing to the middle to get on a point to deny, and then to shoot onto his other point that he had created to kill a character that would have both scored the point and scored sabotage. So that Leman Russ, being able to move that far, ended up being a 13+ point swing.
That's huge.
Over the course of the game, which is where I think really their value is. Just on the drop of a hat, they can just be so far down the table, and doing all kinds of things.
Wow.
So that was a very close game. He was a very good player. I got back to better than lucky than good. Failing that 8-inch charge with a reroll was pretty helpful, pretty clutch.
Yeah, I mean, even then, right? Like, because I know a 9-inch charge with the reroll is like, I think it's a 48% success rate, so close enough to a coin flip that like, as humans we won't notice the difference. I'm pretty sure an 8 with reroll is still only like a 60%.
Yeah, it's still not super reliable.
Yeah.
But it stings when it happens and it stings when it doesn't.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I actually have to ask, how risky of a player are you when you're like looking for these charges with your tanks? Like, are you gonna go for the 9s, or are you just gonna be like, I'm not gonna take anything if it's more than a 3?
It depends on I really try and look for value. And so very frequently, if it's something that won't kill my tank, I'll go for the 11-inch charge.
Fair. Yeah.
Well, because in terms of either I make it and now my tank is 11 inches further up the field and I've tied up one of your units, or I don't, and then, well, that's fine either way.
Yeah.
But I think I try to do both, if that makes, like, I try to be risky with some tanks to like keep my opponent off balance. But then like the Dorns, I try and play very conservatively with. They generally don't get sent in deep early unless I'm quite desperate.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Did you ever charge like the Thunderbolts with anything? Because one of the things I know about them is they get like their bonus damage on the charge, and I think if we charge them, they don't get it. And then
Yeah, that's
they
correct.
can't kill tanks at that point.
The one downside to that is their army, they just get fallback and charge as an army roll. So in that case, you're more often eating kind of free damage. I did, however, charge his Blade Guard with a Dorn at one point. Because I was like, those Blade Guard are just going to bounce off this Dorn, and they did. And I just wanted to flip the point. So just charged Dorn onto the point, flipped it, and Blade Guard just bounced off it.
Makes sense.
The subsequent matchup, though, that is one where, we'll get to, I guess, in a second.
Let's go ahead and talk about it, because you end up playing against the Boogeyman in the finals, up against the more Dakka detachment, which I'm learning more and more GTs around the world are outright banning this one, because it is oppressive for a lot of different people. But you said you had put in a lot of tech into your army to make sure that you were ready for this one. How did this game go? This one was on stream as well, right?
Yeah, this one was on stream. Tabletop Live, if people are interested in checking it out. They go to a lot of events in Canada. They go to events in the States. They're great guys. I think they went to the WTC. They traveled to Europe last year, too. So
great stuff, yeah.
Check them out. And yeah, I was against Will, also a friend of mine, also on Team Leg. And yeah, so Dakka Orks, a lot of tech, a lot of Boogeyman. I thought if there's an army that can do it, it's Hammer. And the big reason is the tank bustas will kill anything. With the shock attack gun and the tank bustas, if they put the buffs on, doesn't matter what it is, they're gonna destroy it.
Yeah.
But they're only gonna destroy 3 things because they only have 3 tank busta units. So we started off, he got the deployment roll off, which is unfortunate. So he was able to put he had a unit of commandos as well, which meant he was able to put his infiltrators stringing right across the middle, which was bad for me if I went second. Thankfully, though, I went first. I think had I gone second, I was going to get jailed beyond belief. It was going to be commandos in my face. It was going to be Zog's unit in my face. It was going to be a really hard hole to dig out of. It's possible to dig out of that hole because thankfully the commandos in Zog's unit, they're not really killing tanks. They're just being annoying.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't, like, I can kill them in a turn. The fallback and shoot is also pretty clutch in the strat. And I think I would have been able to flip his natural expansion. He had a truck that would drive on there. I could drive a Hellhound on there. So I think even going second, I think I might have been okay. We didn't play it. Thankfully, I went first, so I got the commando unit for free. I was able, with the mortars, we're able to get most of Zog's unit as well. So that was kind of his 2 like big infantry assets. And then this was the plan. I staged the Hellhounds just about as aggressively as I could in order to be bait. And then it goes to his turn too. He drew Bring It Down, and he just saw blood. I had a Russ out there, I had the 2 Hellhounds, and I had a Sentinel, and he was like, I'm going to kill all 4. And I was like, okay.
I believe you.
I believe. Well, and he didn't actually kill all 4. The Hellhound lived on 1 wound.
Let's go.
And then later exploded.
Oh, no.
Classic Hellhound things. But it meant that he took out all of his tank bustas.
Yeah.
And as soon as all the tank bustas came out on turn 2, I was like, I think I have this game. Because then on my crackback, I got 2.5 of the units. And then the remains of that 3rd unit went into a Dorn and just bounced, which can happen with them because it wasn't a full unit. And then I got the 3rd unit on my turn 3. So by turn 3, he was down to effectively no anti-tank.
Yeah.
Which meant that Dorn on each side objective. Gaskell's unit did punch up the middle. And I put a lot of fire into them, bounced on 1 turn. But then they went into a Dorn with the 4-up invul, and then they bounced. And And then on my subsequent turn, I didn't bounce into them. I also got a little bit lucky with my leadership checks, but better lucky than good. Didn't bounce into them, got the unit, and then that was kind of the game.
Yeah.
And so it really hinged on minimizing the effects of Zograd's unit, make sure you don't get fully jailed, and killing the tank bustas as soon as possible, while also minimizing their damage. Because trading out the tank bustas for 2 Hellhounds and a Russ, great trade.
Cool.
Would take that any day. But it was putting those 3 tanks in a position where he kind of felt that he had to make that trade.
Yeah.
That if he doesn't make the trade, then the Hellhounds can like move up and pressure things, hold him back. So really kind of just forcing, like, I want you to make this trade, and then once they bite, then going in hard to get the tank bustas.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad at the very least it sounds like you and I have landed on a similar like method to try and deal with more Dakka, because I am also like looking at lists where it's like, well, I have 7 or 8 tanks. Like you're going to kill 3 of them, and that means I have 4 or 5 still waiting to kill you. So I mean, excuse me. Sounds like it's been a very effective way to actually try and play it. But I'm kind of curious. Let's go back to the mortars a little bit. After you neutralize Zograd's unit, what were the mortars doing for you this game?
So actually, yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think I didn't use them in the mid game as well as I could. So I killed Zograd's unit. That was turn 1, 2, and then turn 3, 4. I was kind of thinking too much about the Dorns. I wasn't really thinking about the mortars. So I think I put some of them into a unit of Ludas, which, like, okay, they're 1 wound, like, chips through them. Excuse me. Turn 4, the kind of big brain thought was he had pushed out all his trucks, so he really didn't have anything in the backfield beyond a unit of 10 grots. So I was able to pick up his scoring grots.
Nice.
And they don't provide sticky. So that ended up being like a 5-point swing just to be able to do that, just to be able to, like, oh, I got your scoring unit now.
Yeah.
It was like, if he just parks a truck there, then that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of I didn't do that on turn 3. I did it on turn 4. It ended up working out because he hadn't quite realized that was possible either. And I think what I should have done with them is on turn 2, after Zograd's unit is dead, on turn 3, I should have moved them out just immediately to start blocking up Gazgul's unit. Gazgul's unit making contact with a Dorn was almost a really big mistake on my part. And if those mortars are moving twice, possibly with an advance on the first time, probably not on the second time because I want to chuck a grenade, they're still getting like 20 inches up the table.
Yeah.
And if they can just like line up, like spread out in front of Gaz's unit, then that can hold him back from 1 more turn. And I don't have to get lucky on some Dorn invul saves to keep it alive. I just have another turn that I can put fire at Gaz's unit before they get too deep into my face.
Yeah. One of the things I've noticed with mortars in general is it's really easy when you have them to be like, I don't have to move them. They have like an okay target, and you just kind of like, all right, that's fine. Is there any like mental tricks that you have to like help yourself like get to that spot? It's like, I could shoot the Ludas, but the better play is to do this other thing. Is there anything that you've like drilled yourself into helping yourself to understand that?
Yeah, so actually where I first started drilling this in was with Montka Tao. So Montka Tao, you get a lot of stuff. It's not very good stuff, but you get a lot of it. But what I was running into when I was first getting reps on Montka is I would often have things like a Riptide that would just be staged behind a ruin, and I would kind of I just wouldn't move it. I would just, like, it's safe, it's kind of ready to do something maybe next turn, but I wouldn't like activate it. And so what I got into the habit is, as I go around the table, just like literally just touch every unit. I just reach out and think about, should this unit be here? Can this unit stay still this turn? And so in that final game, it was the finals, so I was kind of wigging out. I think on the stream, I'm like begging one of my friends for coffee. And so I kind of forgot some of that. But I think the mortars in particular are, like, I think it's really just touch them and just think to yourself, can these guys stand still this turn? Or would they be better moving up so that next turn they can contest an objective, they can do a secondary? I think at one point I drew containment. I just couldn't score it. Just because like my early chaff had died. But had I been out there with those mortars, maybe I get like a couple extra points because they're in position to do containment. I think the other unit that I didn't touch enough was my Enginseer. Too often he'd be standing next to a tank and I'd be like, oh yeah, that's fine. He can just bop that tank on for the next turn. But I really should have been kind of advancing him around to the tank that I'm most likely to kind of use and then lose on the follow-up turn.
That's definitely something I've noticed. Like a little trick with the Enginseers is you generally don't want them behind a tank because the tank moves 10 and the Enginseer moves 3, and even sometimes that advance roll that you roll on the Enginseer is not enough to keep up with the back of the tank. So oftentimes just like having them towards this front side of the tank, the tank is like 4 or 5 inches long or something like that. That's going to be usually enough that the Enginseer can keep up, and sometimes even do actions if you need them to. Cool. So with that, you end up winning. When's the last time you'd won a GT before this one, actually?
Ooh. I don't know if I had, actually.
Oh, really? Well, congrats on the first one.
Well, yeah, I'd won some like 20 plus events that kind of count as a GT, but this was the first 2-day event that I had sealed it all the way to the end. On the inaugural dust, I came I think the first one I came second by a couple battle points. So this one felt good to bring it all the way to the end.
Yeah. One other thing I kind of want to bring up with this one is this is maybe one of the lowest scoring GT wins I've seen in a long time. Because, there's a 57 here. There's the highest score that you had was your round 1 where you scored an 83. Do you find that it's generally a thing that you build your list? Because, I know, in the UKTC, they're incentivized to score as many hundreds as they can, because if you go 5-0, but you do it with all 60s, you don't make the top cut. Is that something that, you ever build your list, I'm going to score as many points as possible, or are you much more of the style of, I don't care how many points they score, I'm going to score one more than them?
So I think coming from the WTC team format, you're really incentivized to push differential. So you want to score a lot of points, but you also want to keep your opponent from scoring points. And so I think if there's something that I'm good at as a player, having played guard so long, I think one of the big benefits of guard is keeping your opponent from scoring points. And so... and this is where still getting reps on the list. I found often I'd be using too much chaff to keep my opponent from scoring points, which would mean I wouldn't have chaff to score my own points. So while I was keeping my opponent down, I also wasn't running away with the game with these lists. I think that was kind of a feature of Hammer.
Fair.
I played some Tao lists that it's I'm gonna get 20s on a bunch of tables. I've played some guard lists where it's I'm bringing, actually way back in the day, I used to bring 300 infantry models. Be I'm taking over the board. Yeah. What are you gonna do about it?
I always think that's so funny whenever those lists start becoming popular, because I look at them and I'm glad you're having fun. That's not the way.
I'm scooping up piles of guys.
Yeah, I always thought my friend thought it was really funny when I was playing full infantry Bridgehead, and depending on how much space there was around the table, sometimes I just there'd just be a pile of dead models in the corner of the table because I don't have anywhere to put them. But it was always very entertaining. Makes a lot of sense. So Zach, with that, I got a couple of hot take questions for you, and then we can go ahead and close out with whatever you have. The first one I always like asking: what is the most overrated unit that you see people taking to GTs these days?
Most overrated?
Yeah, people bring them and are I don't even know if they make it into a list.
I don't even know if they make it into a list. Oh man. I don't know. That's a I don't know. I think it's part of the state of the game. I don't. You know what? Krieg heavy flamers.
Oh, interesting.
There's if we want to say a hot take, they didn't make it into my list.
Yeah.
I tried them out. Well, when they came out, I was like, these guys are going to be crazy. I immediately hobbied up 9 of them. But then I started testing them, and they just weren't singing to me.
Yeah.
I think they fall a little flat on. They sound amazing, but for 75 points, they're competing with so many other good things that they're just not that good. They're overrated.
Yeah.
Krieg heavy flamers.
There you go. Now, I do have to ask, did you see the most recent WTC FAQ that kind of addressed like whether or not they can shoot on death in melee? Did you see that?
Vaguely. I've never tried to shoot them in melee because I was just kind of like, I don't think they can.
Yeah.
But I was like, all right. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't fully internalize it because I was going to play a GW format GT, but I am going to play a WTC team event again next weekend. So maybe I'll go read some of their FAQs.
Nice, yeah. I think that one was really weird because there's a lot of like weird rules breakage around what happens when a model shoots versus when like a unit shoots. So it's a little interesting thing. But the next one, I want to get 2 other units that you think are incredibly underrated. The units that the community is kind of left to the side that you think should be, if not in every list, then at least they should be looking at them and thinking about putting them in their GT lists.
Well, while we're talking about guard, Ratlings.
Ratlings, yeah.
Man, do I love my Ratlings. I was iffy on them before the event. After playing the event, I think 2 units are an auto include.
Wow, yeah.
I think Ratling, they just bring so much to the table. They hit on 3s. That's cool. They just bring so much to the table. They're so slippery. They move block. They score. A little bit hard to buff them, but you don't even need to buff them. They're fast. They shoot. Like, what can't they? They infiltrate. What can't they do? Mm-hmm. And then I think my second one, Leman Russ battle tanks. Well, I think they have a place in many lists, and like I said, as a skirmishing unit. I think the one piece of advice: don't expect too much of them. Don't expect them to win the game on their own.
Yeah.
But if you just go into it, oh yeah, this unit's going to skirmish, they'll surprise you.
Interesting. I'll have to give some reps to that style of idea because I don't think I've ever played like Leman Russ as a skirmishing unit. Even if I do tend to play them a bit farther forward, do you think that the battle tank is just like a combined hammer, or do you think it also has a good place in other lists or other detachments as well?
It'd be harder to justify. I think combined in hammer in particular, just for the speed, right? If you're skirmishing, you really want that speed. I think in other detachments, but back to with the rerolls, they don't necessarily need an order. So they can kind of operate independently. So even if you're Dorn TC, or if you just can't even order them, they can probably still be effective.
Yeah, I'll throw the third one in there for you just automatically because you didn't even mention the Catachan mortars still showing up in lists. Everybody in the community is like, they're dead. They went up 50 points. Steve Boucher says they weren't even good in Bridgehead, so you know, hot takes coming in all around. But Zach, is there any other like thoughts that you have for like people who are trying to get better, particularly with Guard, but just in general 40K? What else can we do?
I think ABC, always be charging.
Always be charging.
When I have new friends who are looking for advice, always be charging. Particularly with vehicles, as you can tell, I really like vehicle play because you can shoot in combat, you can shoot out of combat. That I'm not stuck in here. I'm not stuck in here with you. You're stuck in here with me.
Yeah.
And on the subject of skirmishing units. One of the kind of like my hallmarks of my Tao play is charging people with hammerheads. I use hammerheads as skirmishing units.
Wow.
That T10, 14 wounds, they're pretty chunky.
They are.
And they're only 145 points. So even when the railgun isn't necessarily effective, you still have just a big chassis that can just go and touch things. It can fit into weird little angles because it's kind of a funky shape. And so just it can tank shock. Why not?
Yeah.
So I think my big one is look for charges where your opponent might not expect them.
Yeah.
That isn't to say all maybe don't always be charging.
UBC
you don't want to get
usually be charging.
usually be charging. Yeah, it doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
Yeah.
And then I guess my second one that I kind of hit on, touch every unit. Just go around the table. Because your units only get 5 turns of activations.
Yeah.
And so if the previous turn, if you don't move and that leaves you kind of out of the fight for another turn, right? That's a huge part of the game that you've just missed out on.
Yeah.
So just kind of like go around, even that unit, like it's safe behind a ruin, but maybe it could be pushed forward. Right? Like maybe it could be in that next spot.
Yeah. Is my opponent going to shoot at this if they can, or are they more worried about the fact that there is a Dorn standing next to it?
Exactly that. Okay, can I push this unit out safely? Is this a risk? Even if I expose them, are they still potentially safe?
Yeah.
And just kind of like in a tournament game, you generally have an hour and 15 minutes at the minimum. Just spending 10 seconds on each unit to be like 10 full seconds. If you look at a unit for 10 seconds and think about, should I move this unit? I think it'll translate into success.
Yeah. Well, I like it. I like it a lot, Zach. Congratulations on the first win here at All Is Dust.
Thank you very much.
Fun. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun talking to you. I'm excited that you joined the Discord as well. If anybody else is watching and you want access to Discord as well, Zach, I've done this with a couple other players before, but I want to do it with you now. We've gone through a couple of different passwords that they can send me on like Reddit, Discord, whatever. What do you want to make the new password for the Discord?
Ooh, the new password for the Discord? I think it's got to be always be charging.
Always be charging. I like it.
One word, always be charging.
There we go. Well, if you want access to Discord to talk to Zach and a bunch of other players, make sure you find me wherever you can. Send me that password. I'll send you a link to the Discord as well. But for now, thank you so much for coming on, Zach. I've been Josh with Joshi Howard. I'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.